Ambassador Hil, we are here at GlobSec 2025 in Prague, where global security and transatlantic responsibility are key themes. How do the Western Balkans fit into Europe's broader strategic plans, and what role do you see for Kosovo in that context?
Well, first of all, I think it's very clear that the European Union understands that it has some unfinished business, and that unfinished business is in the Balkans. And I think they're weighing now how to figure out new members. Do they do it one country at a time? Do they try to bring them in together? So there are a lot of issues there. And of course, they're also looking at questions of alignment, issues like that. But I think the mood is that the European Union really needs to step up and take care of some unfinished business, and I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Yesterday here at GlobSec, you said that it's hard to predict Trump's policy, but still I'm going to ask you, what kind of approach should Kosovo expect from his second administration?
I think there's going to be an effort from the U.S. to tell the countries in the Balkans to start working out their own problems. I think the era when countries come to us or come to some Western European country and complain about their neighbor, I think people are kind of tired of that. And the main issue, of course, is that there are other things going on in the world. We do not live in the 1990s anymore. We live in a very different era. We certainly understand that the question of Israel, the whole issue with Iran, which is enormous, question of Gaza, and of course the major issue, I think, for Europe, which is Ukraine, and what we're all doing for Ukraine. So I think the era when one Balkan country can come to us and complain about another Balkan country, people don't have time for that anymore. And so they want to see some patterns of cooperation created within the region, and not simply each country going to some favorite member of the international community and saying, help us.
The United States has historically been one of the Kosovo's main strongest allies. Do you expect this to continue like this, or do you foresee any change in tone or priority?
I think to some extent that depends on what people in Kosovo want to do. I can tell you that these issues in the Balkans are very complex, but the complexity of these issues exceeds people's interest in understanding them. So to go to the U.S. and say, oh, we have all these problems with our neighbors, et cetera, people say, look, everyone has problems, work them out. So I think what there's going to be is an expectation that without necessarily having mediators every day, without necessarily having NGOs or friends every day, that we want to see some people reach out to the immediate problem, to the immediate neighbors, if they have problems with the neighbors, and try to work it out. Because people simply, the international community has moved on to other issues. I'm not saying the Balkans isn't important. As I mentioned, it's very much of an unfinished business in Europe. But people in the Balkans need to understand there are other things going on in other parts of the world. And so don't expect people to drop issues that they're dealing with, whether it's in Ukraine or the Middle East, to say, okay, Kosovo, we'll try to help you with that. Kosovo's really, like all the countries in the Balkans, needs to step up and take care of its own problems.
Recently, Kosovo's acting government agreed to temporarily host up to 50 migrants deported from the United States as part of a third country relocation arrangement. What does this step say about Kosovo alignment with U.S. interests?
I think it shows that Kosovo has an interest in aligning with the U.S. and trying to help the U.S. with its own problems. But I just want to stress that these kind of symbolic gestures, they're very important, they're very useful, but they need to be followed up with a broader approach which makes sure that Kosovo is not on the list of problems.
Do you expect the United States will have an active role in facilitating the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, or would it be more effective to let the EU lead even as the process?
I think the U.S. for a number of years has said this is really something the Europeans need to resolve. The U.S. has had a special envoy for a number of years, but I would expect a little less U.S. hands-on in the current climate than it's been in the past. So I think the idea of the U.S. being absolutely engaged every day in the Balkans, it's going to be very different. You'll see U.S. business interests involved in the Balkans. There'll be some diplomatic activity, no question, but I would not expect for the U.S. to step in and help solve people's problems. People are going to solve their own problems.
You have mentioned before that Kosovo's government bears much of the responsibility for the lack of progress in the dialogue. What specific actions or decisions were you referring to?
You know, when I think of the responsibilities to address things, I'm thinking of the normalization agreement, the so-called Lake Ohrid agreement, which I think is a very fair agreement, very carefully worked out with the help of Mr. Lajcik. And it's rather disappointing that we cannot seem to understand, we cannot seem to get to the point where the Association of Serb Municipalities has not been agreed, and instead it became bogged down in issues that are more propagandistic than they are real. That is, who signed what and questions like that. We need to see that agreement done in full, and part of that agreement is the idea that there should be some limited autonomy for Serbs in northern Mitrovica. It's an association dealing with issues of schooling and hospitals, questions like that. There are models for this all over the world, especially in Europe. And when then Prime Minister Thaci signed that agreement, it should have been implemented. So that's one issue. But I'm not saying Kosovo is the only country with issues. I mean, other countries, including Serbia, have to do its part too. But specifically, in answer to your question, Kosovo should focus on this Association of Serb Municipalities and move on from there. Serbia is not challenging Kosovo territory. They're not. In fact, the whole issue in the Balkans, you know, people talk about territory, people talk about land. The real issue in the Balkans, people should understand, is not land, it's people. It's a question of, do people in the Balkans want to stay in the Balkans, or do they want to move elsewhere? And so far there continues to be this out-migration of people. This isn't about land, there's plenty of land. The issue is whether people want to stay and work and live in the Balkans.
Do you think Serbia is doing enough?
I think everyone has responsibilities, but I think the time when foreigners say you're not doing enough or you're doing enough, I'm not going to get into that. I think everyone knows what they have to do.
In 2021, you said that mutual recognition between Kosovo and Serbia would unlock Serbia's European potential and contribute to...
I don't think I said that. I think someone else said that. We've not talked about mutual recognition. We've talked about normalization. That's what's on the table.
It was a mutual recognition before.
We're talking about normalization. That's been the EU position. We've supported the EU in that.
Okay. During your time as U.S. ambassador to Serbia...
Again, I want to be very clear about this. This is not about sloganeering. This is not about saying, I like this guy and I don't like that guy. This is about trying to resolve problems. I think the European Union put forward a pretty serious proposal in Ohrid. That's what's on the table. That needs to be addressed.
And how would you respond to the some observers in the region, especially in Kosovo, perceived your approach as being overly accommodating toward President Vučić? How would you respond to that?
My approach is to deal with how the U.S. government wants to see things addressed. We have a lot of interests in Serbia that have nothing to do with Kosovo. Serbia has been helpful on Ukraine. We want to see that continued. But we're certainly not in trying to deal with some of the interests that we have with Serbia. It doesn't mean we're anti-Kosovo. We have a lot of interests in Kosovo as well. So again, I would be careful with the idea that great powers are somehow choosing between countries. We're not interested in doing that. We'd like the whole situation calmed down. We think the European Union approach was correct, and we'd like to see that approach followed.
If I'm not mistaken, in 2021 you also said that U.S. needs to show Serbia that it offers better alternative than Russia and China. But has that message gotten through? Because we continue to see a strong relation between Serbia and two countries. Vučić also recently was in Moscow.
More recently, Vučić was in Ukraine offering
and
assistance.
does this mean that his policy of balancing is actually successful?
You will have to ask him. I'm not here to critique his policies. I'm not here to critique Kosovo policies. From the U.S. perspective, we want countries to be helpful on what are the central issues of our time. The central issue in the European theater right now is Ukraine. Countries that are prepared to help Ukraine, work with Ukraine, are countries that we want to work with. But, you know, these are practical issues that we all have to deal with. And to make somehow Ukraine secondary to older issues stemming from older times, I think is missing the point. We live in a very dangerous moment in the world. And Ukraine is one of those issues that needs to be addressed with the greatest sense of urgency. And so Serbia is doing some things, so of course we're going to work with Serbia on that.
Were you surprised by Vučić's visit to Moscow?
I'm sorry, it happened after I left. I left Belgrade in January. I think it's been predicted by a number of people. There are a number of reasons for it. But again, I think it's not really what we need to worry about. What we need to worry about is who's helping Ukraine and who is not.
Going back to Kosovo, Kosovo is currently facing a prolonged institutional vacuum after its election, still waiting for the formation of new parliamentary leadership. From your perspective, how damaging is this? I mean, internally and in terms of Kosovo's credibility as an international factor?
I mean, everyone has its politics. We have our politics. Our politics have been very rough and very tough in recent months. So I'm not here to criticize Kosovo. They'll have to work it out according to, you know, what they can get people to agree on. It's not easy. So I'm not here to criticize Kosovo on that. Or, you know, obviously Kosovo needs to form a government, needs to have some stability in the government. But let Kosovo handle that. It's not for me to handle that or to express opinions about that.